Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7. It's the 7th of December. Joining me on the programme this evening, we have Ronnie Cowan, MP. Ronnie, welcome to the programme.
Good evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. Okay, and also joining us this evening, old friend of the programme, Sam Paton. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Gordon. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Anyway, I'm going to get on with the coronavirus update first of all. And as of 2 o'clock today, a total of 1,225,694 people in Scotland have now been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK regional government testing centres. Of these, 1,124,911 were confirmed negative, while 100,783 were positive. There are 677 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. There was one new reported death of a person who tested positive today. This, of course, will be an underestimate of the number of cases, with not everyone with the virus who displays symptoms, and not all of those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 974 were in hospital last night, 59 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 3,917. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures published today show that 61,434 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 189 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. Now, if you'd like to join us here in the conversation, you can do so on Twitter by following us at Broadcast Scot and using the hashtag Scotland at 7. And now, today's first main story. Staff are ready to administer the COVID-19 vaccine. Healthcare workers are ready to begin vaccinating priority groups in Scotland against COVID-19. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, met staff coordinating the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine at Western General Hospital in Edinburgh. The hospital is one of 23 centres where priority groups will be vaccinated against coronavirus. The First Minister had a tour of the facility and learned about the detailed preparation which has gone into organising the delivery of the vaccine. Those giving the vaccination to others will receive the injection first. The programme will then follow the independent advice received from the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, which recommends prioritising those with the greatest clinical need, including those aged over 80 and health and social care workers. So, first of all, let me come to you, Ronnie. What's your reaction, first of all, to the start of the vaccination process now beginning tomorrow? Obviously, it's good news, but what's your feeling? How long do you think it's going to take us to get everybody vaccinated?
Well, first and foremost, as you say, it's tremendously good news. This is what we've been waiting for most of this year. So the fact that tomorrow it starts, it's a complicated rollout. It's actually a follow-up after and 2 weeks after it, and then the time where the test or the time over that to built up the immunity to it. We still don't know how long that immunity can last for. So it's not the perfect solution, but it's a long, long way to develop the vaccine in a short period of time. But tomorrow, not a kick-off. It does not mean the vaccine's going away. It does not mean we're not guarding ourselves. It means we're still going to wear a mask, we're still going to wash our hands, all that stuff has to stay in place. But the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully, is what we're looking at now. I went for my flu jab today. That was great to get that in the year. But if in the vaccine case, you've got to remember to go back 4 weeks later and get that second jab. So it's more complicated to roll out than the flu jab. But the medical experts are in charge of this know exactly what they're doing. They've been well versed in what they have to do. I'm sure they'll be on top of the situation.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Ronnie. Let me turn to you, Sam. Obviously, it's good news. Are you planning to get the vaccination yourself?
Well, I'll be one of the last category to get the vaccination. As somebody being at the lower end of 50, or I was going to say the right side of 50, and quite healthy. So I just thought I would get that in there, it's Monday. I will be getting it, but I don't know how long I'll need to wait. But yeah, it'll be, it's good to see. It's good news and it's positive. So, and hopefully we can get back to some sort of normality. it
Well-
will help a lot of families.
I hope so,
So-
Sam. It's the start, obviously, of something bigger. I mean, we know it's going to take many months to do this, and as Ronnie was just saying, this is not just a single injection. We have to have a booster shot. A little bit like the old, that was it the BCG in the old days, Sam? You used to get a booster shot.
Oh, that's right, yeah, because you used to get a wee injection in your wrist, and then you would get the proper injection just up here in your arm. I've still got my mark. But yeah, the same idea, but well, it's going to take a long time to get round everybody. We can't expect everybody, to get it quite quick, but it will take a long time to get round everyone. So we're just going to have to kind of hold tight and wait on it getting round everybody.
Well, thanks very much for that, Sam. Well, talking of waiting brings us to our next story. And the European Union has told the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to decide as time runs out for a Brexit deal. The UK and the EU negotiators made a last-ditch effort to bridge stubborn differences standing in the way of a post-Brexit trade deal. But they had at best 48 hours to avoid a disorderly parting of the ways at the end of this month. The EU-UK negotiations have entered the endgame. Time is running out quickly, said an EU diplomat, after the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, gave member states' envoys to Brussels a downbeat assessment of the state of play. It is for the UK to choose between a positive outcome and a no-deal outcome. There are growing fears of no-deal chaos when the current transition period ends on December the 31st. The Irish Prime Minister, Michael Martin, put the chances of a deal at 50-50, while investment bank JP Morgan said that odds on a no-deal had risen 1/3 from 20%, and the pound tumbled on concerns that there might not be an agreement. Barnier told members of the European Parliament in a separate briefing that negotiations could go on until Wednesday, but no further. Ronnie, let me come to you first for your reaction to this. Now, obviously, things are at a very delicate stage in Brussels at the moment. Is it your belief, many people have expressed an opinion that the British government is actually not wanting a trade deal and all of this is play acting? Do you go along with that?
I was digging back through some of my archives this afternoon to see when I first said this Conservative government would be quite content with a no-deal exit, and that's always been my view of what they're about here. Back in January 2018, I said, don't for a minute think that a no-deal exit, no-deal Brexit is the last resort. There are plenty of people in the Conservative government from day one quite content to go down that path. They're getting closer and closer to it now. Last I heard was the EU negotiators were saying Wednesday. We can't drag this out until midnight on the 31st of December, because whatever we agree to, we have to start putting it in place to be operational. So they're saying Wednesday. Well, how many times have we heard this? I firmly believe that there are factions within the Conservative and Unionist government who will be more than delighted that we're leaving from no deal. And one of the things you mentioned there was the pound was taking a drop in value because of this. But these people gamble on monetary value. Whether it goes up or down, they'll be making money in the back of this. Whether we leave without a deal or not, they'll be making money in the back of this. And it's the rest of the people out of the kingdom, throughout the United Kingdom, that's going to suffer because of what's not been negotiated right now on our behalf. And they've had plenty of time to do all this. David Davis set the tone right at the very beginning. He said nothing's agreed until everything's agreed. And that was a wrong thing to do. We should have the big chunky bits of negotiation in place a long, long time ago, and now we're working in the finer detail. We're, 2-3 weeks away from it, and we know nothing. And that's hard for me to say. Imagine if you're on a haulage firm. Imagine if you're growing eggs. Imagine if you're exporting or importing from all these huge countries, and your business depends upon this. What situation are you in right now? If you can put COVID to the side, because we don't know how it's going to come along, but what situation will we put our hauliers in when they do not know what the deal is going to be and how they're going to transport goods from country to country throughout the EU after the 1st of January?
Well, certainly, I've been hearing reports all day about the fact that European hauliers are unlikely to want to continue to take goods into the United Kingdom because they're paid by the kilometre. And if it takes 3 days to get something to somewhere instead of 1 day, they're just simply, they're not viable routes anymore.
there's also the danger they're going to get stuck at the port. You know, as you say, they're going to pay for the kilometre. They're not getting paid for sitting in the dock of the bay in France if they can't get across the channel. And we don't have solutions to this, which is absolutely ridiculous.
One last thing before I go over to Sam. The other issue that came up recently was the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry. Their CEO was complaining about the letters that were sent to the businesses, which said something like, had a short strap line where they were to, wake up and get ready for Brexit, and he was just saying this was nonsense. I mean, do you think the CBI is going to be happy with the Tory party at the mess they're making of Brexit?
It goes beyond the CBI, and I have to confess a little bit of frustration here. I wish these people had been more vocal a year or 2 years ago. The UK government kept on saying, and Chris Grayling said it to me in a Transport Select Committee, it will be all right on the night, basically. We're working towards a deal. I wish the people behind the scenes here, the business people, the entrepreneurs, they had all at that point raised the concerns they were raising in private. They didn't want to be political about it, and I get that. They don't want to be screaming at government, this is what you should be doing. But they've had grave concerns for a long time now. And to wait till now to say we're not happy with what the government's doing, to me is simply too late. They should have been shouting a long, long time ago.
Okay. Sam, let me come to you. I mean, I know that you've been very sceptical about whether or not the Tories even wanted a Brexit trade deal. But many people have been talking to me today about the fact that there could be food shortages as a result of Brexit, even if there is a trade deal. How do you look on this yourself as a parent of a young child? You're trying to feed that child and keep yourself warm through the winter and not knowing whether or not there's going to be certain foods on the shelves.
It's already getting quite scary. You can already see in the I was actually speaking about this today, funny enough, as well. You're already seeing supplies kind of dwindling in certain shops and things like that, and food prices going up. And it's going to become worse as Brexit happens. I had seen that the trade deal, the talks that were going on today have stopped, and they don't look to be resuming that phone call. So that's kind of quite scary. But I know that I've already been putting things in place to start kind of being a bit more self-efficient in terms of growing certain vegetables and things like that. But not everybody is in that situation. Not everybody has got a piece of land or somewhere that they can do that. There's a lot of people that live in tenements and things, and they don't have access to allotments. And when you're looking at Brexit and you're already talking about like Kent and the lorry parks and things like that, then it starts to make you wonder. It's not just about food; it's about medicines as well. How are they going to get into the country? If lorries are sitting, backed up into lorry parks, and if the drivers are not going to get paid for sitting there for 2 to 3 days, are they going to want to, sit there? Whether it doesn't matter if it's food, clothing, or medicines.
Well,
One of the that I read today. Sorry, Gordon, can I just say that I'm biting at the nails here. One of the junior ministers have turned around and says, James Cleverly says that they are looking at ways of, especially with the COVID vaccine, that they will have that airlifted into the country if ports are backed up. So they're already knowing that the ports are going to end up in chaos.
There's also been an announcement by one of the UK government ministers today, in fact yesterday as well, that the UK government is considering using the army to deliver things like medicines. And I actually watched a military transport plane take off from Glasgow Airport this morning, and I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe this is the way they're planning to do it, using their military to get stuff in.
It's a possibility. We don't know. It's a possibility, but they are obviously already knowing there's going to be a problem with the ports and supplies getting blocked at the ports, due to, because nobody's got the paperwork in place because there's been nothing done.
Nothing's been agreed, so we don't know what paperwork should be.
There is nothing. So we're still, at the 11th hour, we're still, businesses, politicians, everybody's sitting there going, we don't know. And that's
don't.
the reality of the situation.
Can I just
Sorry,
come in on that?
Ronnie, did you say something there?
Yeah, can I come in on that?
Yes, of course.
The problem with James Cleverly's solution there is not very cleverly. The problem with his solution is, if I'm a distributor and I'm somewhere in Europe and I'm sending goods out across Europe, what you're saying to me now is put it in the back of a lorry and transport it through Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, generally where I'm going. But see the stuff you're going to send to the UK, you've got to take that separately and get it to an airport somewhere. And what are we going to do? We're going to fly a plane out there for you to put the stuff in. It disrupts the entire supply chain as it's already designed to be working. So this idea that I'll just stick it in a plane doesn't actually play through. The quantities you get coming by ship massively outweigh the quantities you'll get on planes.
Yep.
And also there's a supply chain in process already, which makes it economically viable for people to distribute their goods. And James Cleverly just wants to rip that up to suit the UK.
Seems. Well, it goes further than that, of course, and our next item deals with the outcome for the rest of the United Kingdom, and that is to do with the UK's internal market bill, a Trojan horse attack on devolution. The SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford MP has described the UK internal market bill as a Trojan horse attack on devolution, which will allow Westminster to undermine democratic decisions made by the Scottish Parliament. Ian Blackford called the bill a hidden in plain sight power grab on Holyrood and has challenged the Scottish Tory MPs to stand against the devolution wrecking plans which could force Scotland to accept standards set by Westminster and devolve policy areas like public health, like the environment and food safety. The bill also means that Westminster taking over spending powers in devolved areas and includes a blatant power grab over state aid policy. Well, I mean, let me come to you first, Ronnie, as a politician in the programme this evening. The internal markets bill has been widely touted by the Tory party. Is it just a bargaining ploy, do you think, in the negotiations, or is this a real threat to devolution?
Oh, the internal market bill rides roughshod through devolution, it rides through international law. It's a colossal exercise in self-harm. And the clauses which Ian Blackford was talking about are clauses 46 and 47. And if you read them, at first reading, you think, well, that's okay. The UK government will be able to make payments, including grants, loans and guarantees, to any person in the United Kingdom for the purpose of. Well, that's good. They're going to make payments to us. And then you realise the areas they want to make payments in are all devolved matters in Scotland.
Yeah.
Economic development, infrastructure, sporting activities and projects and events, international and domestic educational and training activities. So suddenly they've taken control over how that money gets spent in Scotland. And then we harp on about power grabs at Westminster, and Douglas Ross stands up and says, name me one law, name me one power you're losing. He completely chooses to completely miss the point. The point is the money that gets spent in Scotland, those decisions will now get made in England.
So basically what you're saying, I guess, here is that this gives the Tory government the ability to simply drop money into places where they want it to go without any decisions being made in Scotland whatsoever. So does that mean, Ronnie, that they could decide to fund an infrastructure project inside a local authority without any by your leave to the Scottish Parliament whatsoever?
Yeah, they completely bypass. No pun intended. They can bypass the Scottish Parliament and these decisions they're making. They will decide what's best for Scotland and how that money is going to be spent. And people will see pounds and pence and they go, well, they're spending all this money. But surely the people of Scotland and the Scottish Government and our local councils know best where to spend that money. And that's what we should be doing with this money, getting it down to a local level and deciding how it should be spent. The more you centralise that spending, and some people will be critical to the Scottish Government in the past for doing this, and I understand their concerns. You have to make decisions be made at a local level as to where the money is best to invest, to your best bang for your buck in your community. And when you take that away from us, which you've already got the Scottish Government, you're taking another step away right down to Westminster. And you know, it's an age-old concern of ours if they don't know what's happening in Scotland, they'll just spend money, but it's actually true. They genuinely don't have any understanding of what they're going to be doing and how they'll spend that money in Scotland. It's just headlines to say, we're going to spend this money. And unfortunately, That's the way it's going to happen. And we currently, I mean, we're debating this now. The amendment's going through this week. We'll be fighting it back and forward. It's been up to the Lords, it's been amended, it's come back down. And we play this game, which is actually technically called ping pong, when it goes up and down to the Lords of the House of Commons, but the Lords always back down. That's what they do. That's what they're there for, to advise and guide, to scrutinise, but they will not stand in the way of a government passing a bill. So this is where we're going right now. As it stands, as close to we've got this bill right now, is what we're going to get. I say the rolls on beyond Scotland. The rolls on the fact that they're running right through international law as well, which has actually been condemned at the highest level of the Conservative Party. Theresa May came out and condemned and said, you're breaking international law. Karen Bradley said you're breaking international law. Real concerns as to what they're doing with the Good Friday Agreement, how it's going to affect the north-south border and the east-west borders in Ireland and Northern Ireland. But they've completely turned a blind eye to those. They're buying themselves trouble.
Okay, well, thanks, Ronnie. Sam, briefly, if you would. I mean, this is something which I think many people predicted for a long time, that once the Brexit chaos began, that Boris Johnson would have to consolidate power in London. Do you think that's what the purpose of this bill is, Sam, to get control centralised?
Of course it is, and I agree with everything that Ronnie had just said there, and there's not much I can add to that. At the end of the day, that's what it is. It's to undermine all the devolved administrations, and what people don't understand, as Ronnie says, it's just headlines and people think, oh, we're getting money for the X, Y and Z, but what people don't understand is if we don't have control of that money and of infrastructure that's going to go on in Scotland, that goes right down, and I'm going to be quite nitty gritty there, but does that mean that we're going to have any control over to who the contracts go to for that, the infrastructure work within the local communities? Are they going to have total power of that? So you've got to look at the nitty gritty of it, and that's what they're doing, and that's all I've got to say.
Okay, Sam. Thank you for being brief, Sam. Thank you. Okay, well, talking about gambling earlier on, the UK government has been accused of gambling with people's livelihoods with Brexit brinkmanship. The Tory government has been warned that its continued reckless Brexit brinkmanship is gambling with people's livelihoods and will only inflict further economic and social harm as last-ditch talks, continue in the end of the transition period, which looms in just a matter of weeks. It comes as a leaked UK document outlining the worst-case scenario and no-deal exit revealed that the flow of medicines could initially reduce to 60 to 80% over 3 months, which, if unmitigated, would impact on the supply of medicines and medical products across the UK. An earlier Cabinet Office paper dated September also warned that the UK could face a systematic economic crisis as the UK government looks to impose an extreme Brexit in the middle of a global pandemic. It stated that food supply chains face potential disruption as a result of circumstances occurring concurrently at the end of the year, including an extreme Brexit, resulting in price rises which will hit the low-income families the hardest. Separately, the Scottish Government modelling of a low-deal exit estimates that the Scottish GDP would be 6.1% lower by 2030, compared with continued EU membership costing around £1,600 per person in Scotland. In commenting, the SNP's Brexit spokesperson, Dr Philippa Whitford MP, said the UK government's continued reckless Brexit brinkmanship is gambling with people's livelihoods in the middle of a global pandemic, pushing businesses to the cliff edge, and will deliver serious economic and social harm. Boris Johnson's Tory government, which Scotland did not vote for, is imposing a low-deal or a no-deal Brexit in the middle of a health crisis, which the government's own analysis has revealed will hit the flow of medicines and medical supplies. Now, Ronnie, this must sound alarm bells with everybody tonight, that the flow of medicines and medical equipment could be interrupted, with many people relying on regular medicines, particularly prescription painkillers and medicines controlling their conditions. Must be deeply worried about this.
You know, as a politician, I hate to play the game where you just put the fear of God into people and say, you know, this is going to be terrible unless you do what we ask you to do. But when you hear those statistics coming through, and again, for years now, this is just had not happened overnight. For years, we've been standing up in the House of Commons saying, what will the medicine supply? And every time we ask that question, we get accused of trying to scare people. We're 3 weeks away from it now. There are people who rely on knowing there's going to be a consistent supply of medicines manufactured to the right quality, and passed all the right tests that's required of them, and when they go to pick up their prescription or they go to their doctors, it's just going to be there. And if it's not there, it's got an incredible impact on their lives. And it's already having an impact on their lives because people are getting stressed out with the case that they're not going to have those things. And we've known this for a long, long time. There's no way we can suddenly ramp up our production of medicines and vaccines, as we've seen, over this period of time to fulfil all our own needs. We should have been looking at this years ago to get something in place because, and I hate to say this, but people's lives are going to be put in danger now.
Yeah.
And we should have been able to avoid that. And I hate to be scared of this. We have to do something, be scared. But the fact of the matter is, it's not politicians that are now saying it. It's the businesses themselves that are saying, how are we getting our hands on not just the finished article, not just the medicine, but the components that go into making medicines. There's some medicines we make here in the UK, but some key components to that come from outside the UK. They come in from the EU. If we can't get the key component, we cannot make the medicines, some which we make already in the UK. So again, supply chain gets disrupted, whether it's the end product or component within it. And the people, the sharpest end of this are going to pay the biggest price for it.
Okay, Ronnie, thank you. Sam, what's your opinion of this? Are you worried about the supply of medicines yourself?
I'm worried about the supply of everything, to be honest with you. I've found an article from the Human Rights Watch dating back to September 2020. I'll share it on my Twitter feed after the show. And basically, they are very concerned about how things are progressing or not progressing at the moment. And what they've said is they have, the UK imports at least a quarter of its food from the EU. Now, if we start come January, when the ports and everything start to clog up, it's not just food, it's going to be medicine. And what they're saying is the UK government done their own risk assessment in 2019 to say that when it comes to food supplies, basically it's going to be the people on the lowest incomes that are going to be affected by this. And that's going to be the same with medicine as well. So I will share that, but it is getting quite concerning. And one of the things that concerns me is because I know members of family who are diabetics in terms of insulin and how much they rely on insulin. These people are taking a gamble with people's lives, and it is serious and it is real. And it is where it's going to stop, I don't know.
Okay, Sam, thanks very much. On to our next program, our next story this evening. An MP has serious concerns over the UK's plans for the Human Rights Act review. Joanna Cherry QC MP, the MP's Justice and Home Affairs spokesperson, has expressed serious concerns over the UK government's intention to review the Human Rights Act, warning that the plans risk going beyond the HRA to threaten human rights protections in Scotland, as well as weakening citizens' rights across the UK post-Brexit. In a letter to the MP, the Tory government's Justice Secretary outlined plans to create an independent Human Rights Act review, which allegedly seeks to reform the Human Rights Act 1998 and to review the relationship between domestic courts and the European Court of Human Rights. Joanna Cherry has now called for urgent clarity from the Justice Secretary over the scope of the review and whether it will respect the position in Scotland. Now, Ronnie, this again is another area where the United Kingdom is wanting to completely rewrite the rules, isn't it? And I mean, how worried should we be about our human rights in the UK if this review body starts to chip away at the Human Rights Act?
Yeah, well, at this stage, what Jan has called for is greater clarity. Why are we reviewing this? When you review things, sometimes you make them better, sometimes you make them worse. This is Sir Peter Gross, who's a retired appeal court judge, has been put in charge of a panel of people to review the Human Rights Act. So, if you want to be very optimistic, you say, well, great. The UK government's going to look at the situation and say, well, we can improve our human rights. But then you look at their history of human rights and the way they've treated particular people wanting to come to this country, the way that they've turned people back, the way they've split up families, the way they've discriminated against them. And you think, well, that's not a good sign when you want to review your Human Rights Act. And what we're trying to do is allow the courts within the British system, is their phrase, not mine, within the British system, to interpret what's covered from the European Courts of Human Rights and translate that, if you like, into how we actually apply it here in the United Kingdom. Now, that does bother me considerably. I've got much more faith in the European Court of Human Rights doing this correctly than I have whatever could potentially come out of this review. But at this moment, as we said, we're looking for clarification. What is the remit of this review and what are they actually trying to achieve by it?
Okay, well, thanks, Ronnie. Sam, knowing what we know, and it's not very much at the moment, that the Tories want to review the Human Rights Act, what exactly do you think they want to do with the Human Rights Act? Do you think they're trying to dilute it in some way?
How does rip it up and toss it aside sound? That seems to be pretty much what they're trying to do. And the thing is, when you talk about human rights, that comes down to even the most simplest things of our working rights, how we are treated as individuals, how our children are educated. There's so much to human rights. And as Ronnie says, we've got the protection of the European Court of Human Rights, but come January we no longer have that. And again, there's a great article on Human Rights Watch. You can see I've been doing a lot of work on Human Rights Watch.
You certainly done your homework, Sam, yeah.
Yeah, and they're actually quite concerned about this. One, about the food, about medicine, about workers' rights, about all sorts of things right across the full scope of our human rights and how it's going to affect our lives. And that's what people need to understand. It will affect everybody. Some people it will affect more than others, but it is going to affect everybody.
Okay, Sam, thank you for that.
Quickly, actually leaving the EU is not a direct link to our involvement in the European Court of Human Rights. It doesn't drag us out of that. It's still there, it's still in place. We don't actually walk away from that. It's not part of the deal.
So, yeah, for the benefit of our viewers, Ronnie, what you're saying is that the European Court of Human Rights is not tied to the EU.
It's not tied to UK membership. It's not tied to UK membership of the EU.
Okay, so that means that in theory then the British Human Rights Act would still have to, comply with the international standards applied by the European Court of Human Rights?
Well, yes. We should be, and we seem to be saying, how can we interpret this now within the UK? Is my understanding of it.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is the best case scenario for this is the British government trying to find a way to interpret what rules are applied in the European Court of Human Rights into a British Human Rights Act. Is that a fair sort of assessment?
Yes, that's how I would judge it. So we don't know exactly what they're trying to do, but at this moment in time, that's how I would judge it.
Can I ask you one more thing? Sorry, Sam, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm just saying here, I'm just reading on Human Rights Watch that they're saying that the UK refuses to promise to respect the European human rights law. So they're refusing to make the promise.
Okay, so they're not committing to that.
So that could be open to interpretation.
Okay, well listen, thank you for that, Sam. It's always good to have some extra information coming in during the show. Now to our next story, and President Macron of France says that France will sell arms to Egypt irrespective of human rights. President Emmanuel Macron said today that he would not condition the future sale of French arms to Egypt on human rights because he did not want to weaken Cairo's ability to counter terrorism in the region. I will not condition matters of defence and economic cooperation on these disagreements over human rights, Macron said during a joint press conference with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi after the two leaders held talks in the Elysee Palace. It's more effective to have a policy demanding dialogue than a boycott, which would only reduce the effectiveness of one of our partners in the fight against terrorism, he added. Earlier in the morning, France had welcomed Sisi with a cavalry parade through Paris. France views Egypt and its leader as a bulwark against Islamist militants in the Sinai Peninsula and Libya. Now, Ronnie, as a politician, I'm sure you know quite a bit about political history, that France has a long colonial connection with the north of Africa. France has suffered a fair number of terrorist attacks recently. Is this position that Mr. Macron is taking legitimate, do you think?
You know, when I first read the headline of that story, colonialism was the first thing that popped into my head. You know, we are not the world's policemen, and we continue to get involved in other people's fights. You know, it's very, very hard in the United Kingdom for us to criticise any other government selling arms to other countries, because we are right at the heart of this. The money that's generated for the United Kingdom, and we've sold arms onto many countries over many years.
And we still do.
Fueled wars, and then fueled the winners of the wars and the losers of the wars. It's what we do. Massive industry. As you say, we're doing it right up to this day. So for us to criticise France, yeah, I can get that. I'll criticise France. I don't think they should be doing that. But the UK government, we've not got a leg to stand on. We have to get our own house in order, first of all, and stop selling arms around the world. You know, what do you think these weapons are used for? You know, indiscriminately, and the contracts around the globe, innocent men, women, and children are killed by arms produced here in the United Kingdom. So we have to have a long, hard look at who we are selling arms to and what sort of arms we're selling to people. When you're fighting terrorism, what sort of arms is it right, or could you justify selling to people? And what sort of arms are we actually selling around the globe?
A good point, Ronnie. If I come to you, Sam, so Ronnie's saying basically, you know, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. What's your feeling? Is Mr. Macron right? Does he have something, you know, is there something to this that he needs to keep selling arms?
I think you're asking the wrong person that question. Basically, you know, I'm totally against arms sales right across the board. I don't see any need for it whatsoever, and I think it's absolutely disgusting. But Ronnie's right. At the end of the day, there's so many countries that do it, but that doesn't make it right. And I just, you know, there's nothing that I can say that's kind of polite in the sense that I just don't agree with it, full stop, and I think it's disgusting.
Well, many people, Sam, would say that, you know, the weapons that are sold to these foreign regimes are actually responsible for creating the terrorism in the first place. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. And the thing is, the people that produce these weapons will carry on producing them, and they will carry on touting for sales because that's what makes them money. And if you've got people who believe there's a conflict to be fought, they will buy them, and that creates you know, a need for these. So it's a vicious circle, and it's breaking that circle. But no, I just think it's absolutely disgusting, and you know, there's just no need for it whatsoever.
Okay, Sam, thank you for that. I'm going to continue the theme of violence in our next story. Preventing and eradicating violence against women and girls. Organisations who work to tackle violence against women and girls, VAWG, are being invited to apply for a share of up to £13 million to help them develop and to further their vital work over the next 3 years. Delivering the Equally Safe Fund will support frontline organisations and projects that broaden access to support survivors. Priority areas of the fund include developing a person-centred approach, supporting disabled survivors, and working with those in remote or island communities. The new funding will help drive collaboration and innovation towards challenging outdated attitudes and stereotypes, staging early interventions that maximise the safety and well-being of women, children and young people, holding perpetrators to account for their behaviour and choices, and advancing women's equality. Now, Sam, let me take you first on this one. This sounds like exactly the sort of thing that you would support. Would that be right?
Yeah, I do wholeheartedly support this, and I agree. Attitudes and stereotypes need to be challenged. As a mum of three sons and as somebody who has been the other side of domestic abuse and came out the other side of it, it is a very, very sad fact and a sad part of reality in the life and the society we live in. And one of the things that I found difficult was when there's a male perpetrator and he's been, it's like people say, oh, he's just been ratty, he's had a hard day at work and things like that, as if it's accepting so it's about changing people's behaviour, their attitudes, their perception, and doing counselling with families certainly does help. And I had the benefit of from a similar service that actually took the whole family and counselled the whole family.
Yeah.
Not the perpetrator, but me and the kids. And it looked at the behaviour patterns, it looked at how I reacted to the behaviour, and also with the kids. And it was a great, absolutely an amazing thing to be part of. And, and to see more money getting put into those type of counselling services is just amazing, because the thing is with these counselling services, when they're talking to the children, they are teaching the kids what's a healthy relationship and what's an unhealthy relationship, and they're doing that from a very young age, so then they grow up knowing what a healthy relationship is, which is very important, as part of the kind of kids' growth mapping, emotional mapping, to know the difference, whether it's a boy or a girl, because at the end of the day, anybody can be a victim of domestic abuse, and anybody can be a perpetrator of domestic abuse, so it's learning the difference between both, and also learning the difference between somebody being ratty and somebody actually being abusive.
Yeah.
As well, which is very important. I'm so pleased, and I hope more of this gets rolled out.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. Ronnie, what's your take on this?
Well, just what Sam said. I'm taking it from a male perspective here, and I think there's a lot of education required for young men growing up in our society to understand what is and what is not acceptable within a relationship. We've all seen it in some form or other, but I think attitudes are changing. But what we've got to have now is early intervention where people are subjected to this horrible abuse can be helped out of that situation. For too long, many women have been in a situation where they cannot get out of it, they can't break the cycle, they've got nowhere to go with their kids, and that's been a long-standing thing. So if we can help them find respite, but find the right counselling to then put their own lives back together again, and obviously change the attitude. And very importantly, as Sam made the point, kids growing up in that environment should know this is not what they should accept in their own lives. Yeah. Hopefully the funding behind this can educate them about that, and also immediately help the people who are in danger find a safe refuge and improve their lives. It sounds a very simplistic thing to say, it's a very complicated issue. But any research and funding and support that's put into this area, it has to be welcomed, yeah.
Okay, thank you both very much. And now to our next story this evening. Funding ELC for children deferring entry to Primary 1. Announcing that from August 2023, all eligible families who want their child to defer entry to primary school will be able to access a further year of funded early learning and childcare, the Children's Minister Marie Todd said. From August 2023, all eligible families who want their child to defer their entry to primary school will be able to access a further year of funded quality early learning and childcare from our highly skilled practitioners. This will ensure that all children who defer will have an equal right to continue with funded ELC if their parent or carer feels that it's in their best interest. The COVID-19 pandemic meant that we had to delay moving to the new statutory entitlement of 1,140 hours of funded early learning and childcare for all eligible children. And I will soon be able to confirm that delivery of the transformational policy will happen, introducing expanded eligibility for deferral from August 2023 is a realistic timetable that will ensure that we are ready to deliver. We will continue to work with education authorities on the implementation of this expanded offer to families, and will make more information available in due course. I would encourage all families considering deferral to contact their local authority and to visit the Parent Club website to find out more. Let me come to you just first of all, Ronnie, on this. Being able to defer the date on which your child enters primary school is important to some parents, isn't it? Because some children's birthdays fall at an awkward time and would make them very, very young to enter primary school. So surely this has to be a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've got an attitude towards education throughout the United Kingdom, which you seem to be the primary one, sit kids down. In my day, and I'm no expert in the education system, but it was reading, writing, arithmetic, and it was drilled into you. And I like to think we're expanding that now, where kids are taught more social skills, more interaction, and the pressure upon them to be learning in a more formal environment is relaxed until they're more mature and can handle it. I've got one of those early learning centres at the end of my road here, actually built on the same footprint as my primary school was many years ago, and it's a great establishment where kids go there preschool, and it seems to be half their time out in the rain and the mud and the snow, splashing around, just getting to know each other and be good kids. I think hopefully that's a foundation for which they can then go on to be better adults in life. And the formal side of education is hugely important, but kids can get that later on, and I think parents have to maybe learn to take their foot off the gas a little bit.
Yeah.
Their child doesn't have to be fluent in 3 languages and a budding physics expert by the time they're 10 years of age. You don't have to judge your kids on that. People will learn at their own rate. And then, rather than hothousing kids, if we can have them, in potting sheds, learn to get their front fingers dirty and play with their pals and understand what relationships are all about, then I think that's going to be a healthy thing for our society at large.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. How was Sam? Your opinion on this? I'm dying to hear, because I know from my own childhood that I went into primary school way too young because of when my birthday fell, and I always felt like I was behind everybody else. What do you think? Is this something that you would support?
Oh, definitely. I've got young Christopher here. He's just curled up in beside me here. No, definitely, because the thing is, kids all learn at different rates, and Ronnie's correct. At the end of the day, there's plenty of time for formal education. Let them be kids. Let them go and get muddy, climb trees, jump in puddles. Go and pick up slugs and worms and do all these wonderful things. That's what childhood is about. They do generally learn as they're going along.
Plus they socialise as well, Sam, don't they, with other children?
Yeah, and the thing is, what we forget is that kids naturally are wee sponges and they learn as they go along. They just might not be learning in the formal setting, but they learn. And that was the wonderful thing about lockdown, when all the kids were at home. And me and this wee fella, who you can just see the top of his head here, because he's kind of curled up, he was very much, we done our own form of education, so he got to decorate his bedroom, but in that was a bit of maths. There was, and planning and things like that, forward planning and stuff. So he never done formal education, but he did my style of education. And I think being able to defer kids just for 1 year is just going to make a huge difference. And it would be good to see how that comes about, down about 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. What's the difference in the kids that have been deferred for a year, and how they're learning at school? And I bet they would be a lot more relaxed and probably more ready to absorb more formal education than being forced in before they're ready.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much for that. We're just going to move on to our next story now, which is about the support for tenants. A £10 million fund which offers interest-free loans to tenants who are struggling with rent arrears opens for applications today. The Tenant Hardship Loan Fund is designed to help people who have had their finances or employment impacted by coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic and do not have other means for housing support. The new fund is part of a range of support and interventions in response to the pandemic. by giving tenants access to loans to cover a maximum of 9 months' worth of rent arrears and long repayment terms. It provides another option for people who have lost out financially due to the pandemic, but who can't claim support from other means such as welfare benefits. Ronnie, this sounds like another really good news story from Scottish Government, making low interest or zero interest free loans to people who are really in desperate straits.
I think what COVID has highlighted is the number of people who live in an almost precarious fashion, and it doesn't take long when people have lost their job and have got no discernible income to fall into a situation which would have been unthinkable to them, where they're actually in a position where they cannot pay their rent, and where do you go from there? When you eat, so to have a safety net which will kick in and then say, don't worry about this particular issue, you will have a roof over your head, will be tremendously supportive of people, good for their mental health. I'm going to bang one again about a universal basic income, which is one of the things that I've said for a long, long time we should have, and that's a broader safety net for people in this situation. But for the Scottish Government to find this money, or to allocate this money to help people in those situations, I mean, there must be an awful lot of people who, I say, would never have thought that they found themselves in this situation, and through the process of COVID, being furloughed, even 20% off your salary. If people are living hand to mouth as it already is, where do you find that extra money to pay your rent? When you got food on the table, first and foremost, you got to heat where you're staying. We're heading into winter. Things are going to get a bit tougher and a bit tougher some time. So to know that this is there for them, even though it's a loan, it'll have to get paid back over a long time, then it gives the people a reassurance that they're not going to become homeless in the immediate future.
Okay, thanks for that, Ronnie. Sam, what's your reaction to this news today?
There's positives and there's a kind of downside to it, because there's not everybody is in a position to be able to apply for welfare benefits, and he put this money out there as a loan and to give people a bit of a safety net is a good thing. My concern would be if people are already in dire straits, it's how that's going to work in people's mental health. Are they going to start panicking about making the payments at a later date?
It would also add on. I was going to say, Sam, it would also depend on how much debt the person is already in, I guess.
There's that as well, because that's the thing, because people are losing their jobs right now, and there is I know personally of people lost their job, and they are highly skilled, highly trained people who are unable to find another job at the moment, and they're struggling with mortgages, rents and stuff. So there is that. So there is an upside to it, but there's also a kind of downside that we need to be wary of, and to be and at the moment it's like everything else. The Scottish Government is trying to help people, but with one arm tied behind their back with Westminster, it's very, very difficult, and there's only so much money and grants that they can put out there. There's got to come a point where they have to put out loans in order to reclaim that money back. But as I say, I'm concerned about people long term in terms of debt.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. Okay. We're going to the next story now, which is the gambling-related harm all-party parliamentary group, with the UK Government Culture Secretary due to set outline details tomorrow of a proposed review of gambling laws. Our guest, Ronnie Cowan MP, has been at the forefront of the campaign, which is calling on the UK Government to implement effective measures that address gambling-related harm, including tackling advertisements and the impact on children. Now, Ronnie, this is under embargo at the moment. We're not officially making it known, but can you tell us in broad terms what the work of this parliamentary committee has been recently?
Well, I can tell you what the gambling-related harm APPG has been doing. We started out as the all-party parliamentary group looking at fixed odd betting terminals to get reduced from £100 to £2. On the conclusion of that successful campaign against all the odds, no pun intended, we reformed as a gambling-related harm, and that's what we're now looking at. So our demands are out there for anybody to read. What we're looking for is a ban on advertising. We want for gambling. We want to have VIP rooms overhauled, if need be, completely banned. We need to reduce the stakes that people are allowed to put on particularly online gambling. We have to reduce the access that people have got to money to gamble, because people right now, until recently, could gamble on credit cards, but you can gamble on debt. So we want to try and make gambling as safe an environment as we possibly can. We also want to protect children who are getting more and more exposed to gambling through things like loot boxes and skins, which are in the gaming culture, but ultimately they are gambles which people are taking. And those are young kids that are playing those, and their gambling is becoming normalised for them. We're not prohibitionists, we're not saying ban gambling, that's probably the worst thing we could possibly do. But those are the sort of demands we've brought forward. We've been shouting this for some time, and the gambling industry has been kicking back. Now what the government is saying is we need to look at the Gambling Act of 2005 because it's an analogue legislation for a digital age. So all the things we've been asking for, hopefully, are going to be reviewed. We start talking about it tomorrow in the House. I will be zooming in from my living room to respond on behalf of the Scottish National Party. But this is the beginning of the review. But I think the key to this is making sure that the funding for research, for education and support does not come directly from the gambling industry as it currently does. Right now they pay a voluntary levy, which means if I'm running an education setup, if I'm running a support centre, and I rely on that money can pass through the big five gambling companies, slightly broader, coming through something like the Gambling Commission to GamCare to me, then I don't know how much I'm going to get next year or the year after that or the year after that. So I can't employ people and train them and develop them to fight this issue. I'm literally living hand to mouth. So the funding has to become a statutory level, which goes to government, then government through the NHS pushes it back out to the people who've got the expertise to provide the education, the help and support for it. And that to me is the key to the whole thing. But there's a lot of legislation we have to get through, and I just hope the government are talking a serious game, but we're going to hold their feet to the fire on this one every single step of the way.
Well, thank you very much, Ronnie. Listen, we wish you all the best with your efforts to get the government to move on this. Well, we're coming towards the end of the programme, but before we leave you, I just wanted to remind you that Broadcasting Scotland is, of course, running a major crowdfunder at the moment. We are going to be there with you through the next few months, and they're going to be important months going through to May next year. So if you're interested in supporting Broadcasting Scotland and you'd like to see more from us, and the ability to do that is obviously to do with money. If you'd like to help us, you can do so by following the prompt on your screen now. And you can also just learn in a moment from our video on the work that we plan to do over the next few years. Oh, I'm sorry, I think we seem to have lost the video. Anyway, that is about it from us this evening. All that remains for me to do is to thank my guests, Ronnie Cowan and Sam Paton, and I'll join you again on Thursday. But from all of us here at the studio, a very good night to you.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
An independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.